She shouted, "Don't touch me. You look ridiculous," in front of 200 people at her company's dinner. But when I found her secret phone and discovered she had taken $42,000 from our accounts, I realized the humiliation was just the beginning. My wife wasn't merely cheating. She was orchestrating a con that had been going on for years. And her boss's billionaire wife? She had her own agenda. My name is Damon Croft. I'm 43 years old. And this is the story of how my wife ruined our life in the most public way possible and how I eventually found the strength to fight back. It all fell apart one Tuesday evening in March. Megan's architecture firm was hosting its annual awards dinner at the Grand View Hotel downtown. She had been talking about it for weeks, urging me to wear my best suit and reminding me to act appropriately around her colleagues. I should have questioned what she meant by that, but I didn't. I just wanted to support her. The ballroom was filled with Portland's architectural elite, crystal chandeliers, fine wine, and everything you'd expect. Megan looked stunning in the black dress she had specifically bought for the event. I felt proud walking beside her, greeting her colleagues, playing the supportive husband role I had perfected over the years. Everything seemed normal until dinner was served. I sat next to Megan, listening to her boss, Xavier Blackwood, give a speech about innovation and excellence. That's when I noticed Megan constantly checking her phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. "Honey, who keeps texting you?" I quietly asked, reaching to gently touch her hand. The reaction was swift and explosive. Megan jerked her hand away as if I'd burned her, and stood up so quickly that her chair nearly tipped over. "Don't touch me," she yelled, her voice echoing through the ballroom. "You look ridiculous, sitting there acting like we're some perfect couple." The room went completely silent. Every conversation stopped. All eyes turned to our table. I felt my face burn with humiliation, but something inside me snapped. I slowly stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "You know what, Megan? You're not worth this." Then, without another word, I walked out. No dramatic scene, no shouting match. I just left her standing there in front of 200 people, her mouth open in disbelief. I drove home, but I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck in the driveway, my hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. 15 years of marriage, and my wife had humiliated me in the most public way imaginable. But why? What had I done wrong? That's when I remembered the expression on Xavier Blackwood's face during Megan's outburst. He hadn't been surprised or shocked. He looked guilty. And suddenly, the pieces started falling into place. I got out of the truck and headed to the backyard, where Megan had her home office in a converted garage. She'd always been secretive about that space, claiming she needed privacy for client work. I had respected that for years. Not tonight. The spare key was exactly where Megan always kept it, under the fake rock beside her office door. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of her expensive candles hit me, but tonight, it felt suffocating instead of comforting. I'd been in this room maybe 5 times in 15 years. Megan had always made it clear that this was her sanctuary, her creative space where she couldn't be disturbed. Now, I understood why. Her desk was as neat as always, everything in place. But something immediately caught my eye. A charging cable plugged into the wall behind her computer with no phone attached. That was odd because Megan always used wireless charging for her iPhone. I began opening drawers, not sure what I was even looking for. The first few drawers held typical office supplies, business cards, fabric samples. But in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old architectural magazines, I found something that made my blood run cold. A second phone. An Android, not an iPhone, still warm as if it had been recently used. My heart raced as I picked it up. The screen lit up instantly. No password protection. The first thing I saw was a text message thread that had been active just 20 minutes ago, right around the time Megan had yelled at me in the ballroom. Xavier's message read, "How did it go with the husband tonight?" Megan had replied, "Perfect. He's completely clueless. Won't be a problem much longer." Xavier's response came quickly, "Can't wait to have you all to myself." Megan's reply, "Soon, baby. Very soon." I scrolled up through weeks of messages, each one more incriminating than the last. They weren't just having an affair, they were systematically destroying my marriage. There were messages about transferring money from our joint accounts, talks about Megan filing for divorce, and accusing me of being emotionally abusive, Even jokes about how gullible and trusting I was. One message from last week made me physically ill. Megan had written, "He actually thanked me for working late again." "The fool has no idea I'm with you," Megan had texted. Xavier's reply came quickly. "Poor guy. At least he's good for paying the bills while we figure this out." Megan's response was cold. "Not for much longer. I'm getting tired of pretending." I sat there in her chair, staring at the phone that held the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. 15 years of marriage, and I was just a fool paying the bills while my wife planned for my replacement. But as I kept reading, I found something even more shocking. This wasn't Xavier's first time doing this. There were messages about his wife, Vivian, and how she had no idea about any of this. Apparently, Mrs. Vivian Blackwood was a prominent figure in Portland's business scene, with enough influence to ruin both of their careers if she found out. My phone buzzed with a message from Megan. "Where did you go? We need to talk about your embarrassing behavior tonight." My embarrassing behavior. I almost laughed. Instead, I took screenshots of every conversation on the phone, then put it back exactly where I found it. Walking back to my truck, I felt different, no longer broken or defeated. Angry, yes, but also surprisingly clear-headed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Megan wanted to play games? Fine, but she had just handed me all the rules. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my sister Isabella's house across town. She answered the door in her robe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. "Coffee or something stronger?" she asked, leading me to her kitchen. "Coffee. I need to think clearly," I said, slumping into a chair at her table. Isabella had never liked Megan, though she'd always been polite about it over the years. Something about Megan being too calculating and never asking about anyone but herself. I should have listened. I told her everything. The dinner disaster, finding the phone, the messages. Isabella listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with every detail. "Damien, you need to check your finances right away," she said when I finished. "If they're planning what you think they're planning, money is probably already moving." She was right. I pulled up our bank accounts on my phone, and my stomach dropped. Our joint savings account, which had $42,000 just last week, now had a balance of $800. Multiple transfers had been made to an account I didn't recognize. Son of a... I caught myself before finishing that thought. Isabella leaned over my shoulder. "When did these transfers happen?" she asked. "Over the past month," I replied. "Small amounts at first, then bigger chunks. The largest was yesterday, $15,000. Right before the big public scene," Isabella noted. "She's covering her tracks before burning the bridge." My phone buzzed with another message from Megan. "I'm home now. Where are you? We need to discuss what happened tonight like adults." I showed Isabella the message, and she rolled her eyes. "Adults don't steal from their spouses," she said. "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? The old Damien would have gone home, apologized for leaving the dinner, and tried to work things out. But the old Damien didn't know his wife was a thief and a cheater. "I'm going to fight back," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "But first, I need more information." I opened my laptop and started researching Xavier Blackwood and his wife, Vivian. What I found was interesting. Vivian Blackwood wasn't just successful. She was Portland's most influential development consultant, with connections to city council and major construction projects. Her reputation was spotless, and according to several business articles, she was fiercely protective of both her marriage and her professional image. "She has no idea what her husband is doing," I told Isabella. "And if she found out, it would destroy both their careers." Isabella smiled grimly. "Sounds like leverage to me." I spent the night on Isabella's couch, planning my next moves. By morning, I had a strategy. Megan and Xavier thought they were playing a game where only they knew the rules. Time to change that. The next morning, Isabella made breakfast while I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Megan. Dozens of texts ranging from concerned to angry to manipulative. Her latest message read, "Damien, you're scaring me. Please come home so we can work this out. I love you." "Classic manipulation," Isabella said, reading over my shoulder. "Mom used the same tactics on Dad. That stopped me cold. Our mother had cheated on our father when Isabella and I were teenagers. The parallels were unsettling." "Is that why you never trusted Megan?" I asked. Isabella nodded. She has the same patterns. The secrecy, the sudden interest in appearance, the way she makes everything your fault. I've been waiting 15 years for this conversation. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? You were head over heels for her. Besides, I hoped I was wrong. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. I felt sick to my stomach about everything I'd discovered. Instead of going to the office, Isabella and I drove to the bank. The branch manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, knew me well. I'd been banking there for over a decade. I need to understand these transfers from our joint account, I told her. I explained everything, showing Mrs. Rodriguez the statements. She pulled up our account history. These were all authorized with proper passwords and security questions, she said. The receiving account belongs to Blackwood Holdings LLC, Xavier's company. They weren't even trying to hide it. Can I freeze the account? I asked. You can freeze your access, but since it's a joint account, your wife can still access the funds unless she agrees to the freeze or you file for legal separation. I thanked Mrs. Rodriguez and walked outside with Isabella. Legal separation, Isabella said. That's your next step. I'm not ready for that yet, I replied. I need to understand the full scope of what they're doing. My phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Damon Croft? The woman's voice was professional, confident. Yes. Who's asking? My name is Vivian Blackwood. I believe we need to talk about our spouses. The line went quiet, except for my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Xavier's wife knew. How did you get this number? I managed to ask. I have resources, Mr. Croft, and I have information I think you'll find very interesting. Can you meet me this afternoon? I looked at Isabella, who was listening intently. Where? I asked. Pioneer Courthouse Square, 2 o'clock. I'll be wearing a red coat and carrying a black briefcase. The line went dead. Isabella stared at me. This just got a lot more interesting, I said. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I might not be fighting alone. Pioneer Courthouse Square was bustling at 2 o'clock, filled with office workers on lunch breaks and tourists snapping photos. I spotted Vivian Blackwood immediately, a striking woman in her early 40s wearing a red coat, sitting on a bench near the fountain with a black briefcase beside her. She looked exactly like the professional headshot I found online, but there was something colder in her expression, something calculating that the camera hadn't captured. Mr. Croft, she said, standing as I approached. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Blackwood, I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Please, call me Vivian. After all, we're both dealing with the same problem. We sat on the bench, and she opened her briefcase, pulling out a manila folder. I've been suspicious of Xavier for months, she said without preamble. Late nights, secret phone calls, a sudden interest in his appearance. But I needed proof before acting. She handed me the folder. Inside were photographs of Xavier and Megan, entering a hotel, kissing in his car, dining at expensive restaurants while I was working late. How long have you known? I asked. 3 weeks. I hired a private investigator when Xavier started taking mysterious business trips that weren't on his company calendar. I studied the photos, feeling a mix of anger and strange relief. At least now, I wasn't questioning my sanity. What do you want from me? I asked. Vivian's smile was sharp, like a blade. Xavier thinks he's clever using company funds to wine and dine your wife. What he doesn't realize is that I control the majority stake in Blackwood Holdings. I've been documenting every unauthorized expense. She pulled out another document, financial records showing thousands of dollars in unexplained charges for restaurants, hotels, and gifts. The money he transferred from your account went into a company account that I monitor. Xavier's been stealing from his own business to fund his affair. So what's your plan? I asked. Mutually assured destruction, Vivian said calmly. I'm filing for divorce and taking control of the company. Xavier will be left with nothing. Your wife will discover her sugar daddy is actually bankrupt. And what do you need from me? Your testimony about the stolen money from your accounts. With your evidence, we can prove a pattern of financial fraud. Xavier won't just lose his marriage. He'll face criminal charges. I thought about Megan's text messages, her casual cruelty, the way she humiliated me in front of 200 people. I'm in, I said. What's the next step? Vivian closed her briefcase. I'm confronting Xavier tonight. I suggest you do the same with your wife, but don't tip them off about our alliance. Let them think they're still in control. As we parted ways, I felt something I hadn't in years, the thrill of being on the offensive instead of constantly defending myself. I arrived home at 7 o'clock to find Megan in the kitchen, cooking my favorite meal, steak and mashed potatoes. She was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, and her makeup was flawless. The whole scene looked like something from a magazine spread titled How to Win Back Your Husband. "Damien, honey, you're home," she said, rushing to hug me. "I was so worried when you didn't come home last night." I didn't return the hug. "We need to talk, Megan," I said. Her face shifted slightly, but she maintained her smile. "Of course. Let me just finish dinner, and then we can sit down and work through whatever's bothering you." "I know about Xavier," I said quietly. The wooden spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but her voice had already changed. The loving wife act was slipping. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the screenshots from her secret phone. Her face went white. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "Does it matter? I know about the affair, Megan. I know about the money you've been stealing from our accounts. I know about your plans to file for divorce and claim I'm abusive." Megan's expression hardened. The mask was completely off now. "You went through my private things," she said, her voice turning cold. "You violated my privacy." "Your privacy?" I laughed, and it felt good. "You've been planning to destroy my life for months, and you're worried about privacy?" "Damien, you don't understand the situation," she said, switching tactics. "It's really not that complicated. You're cheating, you're stealing, and you're a liar." Megan's eyes flashed with anger. "Fine. You want the truth?" She spat. "Xavier makes me feel alive. He's ambitious, successful, exciting, everything you're not." "Well, here's something exciting for you," I said, pulling out the legal papers I prepared earlier that afternoon. "I'm freezing our joint accounts, filing for legal separation, and Xavier's wife is taking everything he owns." "What are you talking about?" "Vivian Blackwood knows about your affair. She's been documenting everything. The stolen money, the company funds Xavier used to pay for your little romance. All of it. He's about to lose his business, his marriage, and probably face fraud charges." Megan's confidence crumbled. "You're bluffing." "Call him," I said. "Ask him how his conversation with Vivian went tonight." Her hand shook as she grabbed her phone. It rang several times before going to voicemail. "He's probably busy explaining to lawyers why he embezzled company funds to buy you jewelry," I said. Megan tried calling again. Still no answer. "This isn't over," she said, her voice now desperate. "You're right," I replied, walking toward the door. "It's just beginning. You wanted excitement. Congratulations. You're about to find out what it's like to lose everything." I left her standing in our kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of the perfect dinner she'd made to manipulate me back into submission. For the first time in 15 years, I was the one walking away. I spent the night at Isabella's again, but this time, I actually slept. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving whatever Megan threw at me next. The next morning, Isabella made coffee while I checked my phone. Surprisingly, there were no messages from Megan. That was unusual. She typically bombarded me with texts after any confrontation. "Maybe she's finally getting the message," Isabella said, reading over my shoulder. My phone rang. Unknown number again. Damon Croft speaking. "Mr. Croft, this is Trenhagreff. I think we need to talk about your wife." I nearly dropped the phone. Isabella raised her eyebrows questioningly. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked, though something about the name sounded familiar. "Trenon Hogreff. I was married to Megan before you were." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Megan had never mentioned being married before, ever. "That's impossible," I said. "Megan was never married before me. Mr. Croft, your wife has a very selective relationship with the truth. We were married for 2 years, from 2006 to 2008. It ended when I discovered her affair with her boss, a pattern that seems to be repeating itself." Isabella was staring at me intently, catching my side of the conversation. "How did you find me?" I managed to ask. "I've been keeping tabs on Megan over the years, not stalking, just watching to see if she'd changed. When I saw your name in the divorce filing she submitted yesterday, I thought you deserved to know what you're dealing with." "She filed for divorce yesterday?" "Oh yes, claiming irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. She's also requesting spousal support and half of all assets." Sound familiar? My head was spinning. "Can we meet? I need to hear this story." "Absolutely. Powell's books on Burnside, coffee shop section. 2 o'clock. After hanging up, I filled Isabella in on the conversation. Her face grew darker with each detail. She's done this before, she said. Isabella said, this isn't just an affair. It's her operating procedure. Why didn't she tell me about Trenton? Because then you'd know her pattern. Marry a stable guy, cheat with a boss, drain the accounts, file for divorce, move on to the next victim. The pieces were falling into place in the most horrifying way possible. But I also felt something else, validation. This wasn't about me not being good enough. This was about Megan being fundamentally broken. What are you thinking? Isabella asked. I'm thinking Trenton and I need to compare notes. If there's a pattern, there might be legal consequences Megan hasn't considered. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian Blackwood. Xavier lost his job this morning. The company board voted him out after reviewing the financial evidence. He's also being investigated for embezzlement. How did things go with your wife? I showed Isabella the message. She smiled grimly. Looks like their love nest just lost its funding, she said. I replied to Vivian. Megan filed for divorce yesterday. Also discovered she has a pattern. Meeting with her first husband this afternoon. Vivian's response was immediate. Excellent. The more evidence of habitual behavior, the stronger our case becomes. Powell's books was crowded with afternoon browsers, but I spotted Tren Hogref immediately. You look like an older version of me, I said, taking in his average height, brown hair, the kind of guy who seemed reliable and trustworthy. Exactly Megan's type, apparently. Damien, he said, standing as I approached his table. That's me. Thanks for reaching out. We shook hands, and I sat down across from him. Up close, I could see the same weariness in his eyes that I had been carrying for months. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, Trenton said. But I felt like you deserve to know what you're up against. Tell me about your marriage to Megan. Trenton sipped his coffee and looked out the window for a moment. We met in 2005. She was working as a junior designer at an architecture firm. I was an accountant. She was beautiful, charming, seemed to adore me. We got married after dating for 8 months. That sound familiar? I asked. The first year was great. Then she started working late, taking mysterious calls, becoming distant. I trusted her completely, made excuses for the changes in her behavior. Let me guess, she was having an affair with her boss. Richard Kellerman, senior partner at the firm. I found out the same way you probably did. Stumbled across evidence she thought she'd hidden. Trenton pulled out a manila folder. When I found out about your situation, I pulled together everything from our divorce, financial records, legal filings, witness statements. The parallels are remarkable. He showed me documents from their divorce proceedings. Megan had claimed Trenton was emotionally abusive, controlling with money, and impossible to live with. She had requested spousal support and half of their assets. Did she get it? I asked. Some of it. But here's the interesting part. She also drained our joint accounts before filing, just like she did with you. The judge didn't appreciate that pattern of deception. I studied the financial records. The amounts were smaller than what Megan had stolen from me, but the method was identical. What happened to Richard, the boss she was having the affair with? Trenton smiled grimly. His wife found out about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. She took him to the cleaners, both personally and professionally. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Bend. And Megan moved to Portland, changed her image, found a new stable guy to marry. He looked at me meaningfully. Ew. We spent the next hour comparing notes. The pattern was undeniable. Megan targeted reliable, trusting men, used them for financial stability while pursuing affairs with powerful men, then executed a planned departure that maximized her financial gain. The good news, Trenton said as we prepared to leave, is that judges don't like repeat offenders. If you can establish this as a pattern of behavior rather than a one-time marital breakdown, it changes everything. Are you willing to testify about your experience? Absolutely. It's time Megan faced consequences for what she does to people. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: hope. Not just for surviving this situation, but for actually winning. Megan had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I'd roll over and take whatever she dished out, just like she assumed Trenton would. Just like she assumed every other man in her life would. She'd assumed wrong. 3 days after meeting with Trenton, I was preparing for my divorce hearing when Megan showed up at Isabella's door. She looked different, paler, more fragile than I'd seen her in years. "Damien, please," she said when Isabella let her in. "We need to talk privately." Isabella looked at me questioningly. I nodded, and she reluctantly left us alone in her living room. "What do you want, Megan?" I asked, standing while she sat on the couch. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to sit down. "How far along?" I managed to ask. 8 weeks, she replied, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "Damien, this changes everything. We can work through this. We can be a family." I pulled out my phone and checked the calendar. That would put conception right around the time she was having regular meetings with Xavier. "Is it mine?" I asked directly. Her face flushed. "Of course it's yours. How can you even ask that?" "Because 8 weeks ago, you were spending 3 nights a week at hotels with Xavier Blackwood." Megan's composure cracked. "We could do a paternity test after the baby is born." "We can do one now," I said. "At 10 weeks. Non-invasive, completely safe." She looked terrified. "Damien, please. Does it matter? We're married. I love you. I want to make this work." "You love me? Is that why you drained our savings account? Is that why you filed for divorce without telling me? Is that why you told Xavier I was dead weight and couldn't wait to be rid of me?" "I never said those things," she protested weakly. I pulled out my phone and played one of the voice messages Xavier had accidentally sent me. Megan's voice clearly saying those exact words. She buried her face in her hands. "Damien, I made mistakes. But we're going to have a baby. Doesn't that mean something? It means we need to establish paternity before we discuss anything else." My phone rang. Vivian Blackwood. "Excuse me," I told Megan, stepping into the kitchen to take the call. "Damien, I have news about Xavier," Vivian said. "He's been arrested for embezzlement. The FBI found evidence he's been running similar schemes for years, using multiple women to help drain accounts and transfer money." "Multiple women?" "At least 4 others over the past decade. Your wife wasn't his first partner. She was part of a larger pattern." I looked back at Megan, who was sitting on the couch looking miserable. "Vivian, Megan just told me she's pregnant. She's claiming it's mine, but the timing suggests it could be Xavier's. If it's Xavier's child, that creates additional legal complications for him. Financial responsibility during incarceration, potential child support issues. It also strengthens the case that this was a calculated long-term scheme rather than a simple affair." After hanging up, I returned to Megan. "We're doing the paternity test," I said firmly. "And depending on the results, we'll decide how to proceed." "And if it's yours?" she asked hopefully. "If it's mine, we'll figure out co-parenting." "But the marriage is over, Megan. That happened the moment you chose to betray everything we built together." She started to cry, but I felt nothing but pity. The woman I'd loved for 15 years had been an illusion. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment across town, reading a book and enjoying the peaceful quiet. Chester, the orange tabby I'd adopted from the shelter, was purring in my lap. The paternity test had confirmed what I'd suspected. The baby wasn't mine. It was Xavier's, which created a legal nightmare for him since he was facing federal embezzlement charges. Megan had tried to claim I was the father on legal documents, but DNA evidence had put an end to that deception. The divorce had been swift once the pattern evidence was presented. Trenton's testimony, combined with the financial fraud documentation in Xavier's arrest, had painted a clear picture of Megan's systematic approach to relationships. She received no spousal support and only a minimal asset split. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with her history of draining joint accounts. Xavier had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Vivian had divorced him and taken control of their assets as she planned. She'd also provided testimony that helped convict him on multiple fraud charges involving other victims. Megan had given birth to a daughter 3 months ago. Xavier would be paying child support from prison for a child he'd never get to know during her early years. Megan was working as a retail clerk and living in a small apartment. Her dreams of wealth and excitement reduced to the reality of single motherhood with a convicted felon as her co-parent. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, just relief that I was no longer part of her web of deception. Isabella knocked on my door, bringing dinner and updates on her latest relationship. "You look good, Damien," she said, setting bags of takeout on my small dining table. "Healthier, more yourself." "I feel like myself for the first time in years," I replied. "Turns out, when you stop walking on eggshells around someone, you remember who you actually are." Any thoughts about dating again? I scratched Chester behind the ears. Maybe someday, but right now, I'm enjoying learning to trust my instincts again. I ignored so many red flags with Megan because I wanted to believe in the illusion. And now I know the difference between love and manipulation. That's worth more than any relationship I lost. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Croft, this is Sarah Mitchell. I got your number from Trenhawk. I think I need to hear about your experience with Megan. Another victim reaching out. I'd been getting calls like this for months. Apparently, Megan's pattern went back further than any of us had realized. I replied, happy to help. Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow? Isabella saw me typing and raised an eyebrow. Another one? She asked. Looks like it. Apparently, helping other people avoid what I went through is becoming my mission. That's a good mission, Isabella said. Uses your experience for something positive. Looking around my modest apartment, nothing fancy, but honest and peaceful, I realized she was right. I'd lost a marriage, but I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved better and the strength to demand it. Chester purred louder, and I smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well.